What's the best retro gaming computer of all time? Find out in today's show. It's This Week in Retro.
High-resolution color graphics.
This land of high technology.
The revolution in technology that made the information age possible.
Those kids are not afraid of computers.
Retro Corners.
He's making a list and we're checking it twice.
My worm is burning.
Oh, there's some more coming up on this week's show.
Up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.
You didn't spot I made that change, did you, Dave?
I spotted it after I read it out. We'll go with it, though. I put burning the worm, and he changed that to my worm is burning. Worm is read once.
Oh,
right.
let's not ruin the show, Dave. All will be revealed later. And we are, of course, joined by special guest Iain Lee today. Thank you for joining us, Iain.
Thank you so much for having me. I heard, I'm a big fan, and I'll explain in a second, but I heard a few weeks ago, I think Dave saying, we're looking at getting some guests. I did what I never do this. I sent a message saying, I'd love to come back on. And I'll tell you why I'm slightly obsessed with this show. I have listened, the last couple of months, I have gone back to episode 1 and listened all the way up. I recently got to 113, and I think that's where I started listening the first time around. So I've listened to it, the whole evolution of the fabulous boat and Chris joining and Dave joining and Chris going and the guests and all of that. And here's the thing that really shocked me. I never knew, I'm so dumb, I never knew why you called your listeners twirlers. I didn't know. It just never occurred to me. And then in I think it's episode 67, you said, well, you're listening to Twirl or something like that. And it was palm to the head. Oh, this week in Twirl. It puzzled me. I just thought it was a cute word that you had chosen. So there was that revelation. And I'm up to date now. So what I need, and I did mention this to Dave, and I don't know if you've had a discussion, could you do like 4 or 5 episodes a week, please? Because that's about what I was averaging, and it just helps with the drive and, doing the washing up and stuff like that. So I just put that out there for your consideration.
Thank you, Iain. Well, I mean, if you want to become a permanent host, then yeah, we can do it every day of the week. Fantastic. Great. It's all agreed.
It's very, very tempting. But I've been, and also I get confused about time. So I went to Crash a few weeks ago. Was it last week, maybe? And I was chatting to Dave and I said, tell Neil I'll see him at Crash, because in the podcast you said, I'm going to be at Crash, the Spectrum event. But that was last year.
That was last year. Yeah, you were a year behind. Yeah.
I'm traveling through time like nobody's
business. And we did
so
briefly meet and say hello.
We did
It was a very busy event, but we did manage to say hello.
It was. I got to meet Holly as well, which was a delight, and it was lovely hearing Holly. That was this week that Holly was on the podcast, not a year ago.
Yep.
Okay. That's lovely hearing her. And Crash this time was a lot of fun as well. I like those events.
Well, for those who don't remember Iain,
I was going to say,
been
I
on the
feel
show
we need to introduce and explain who he is. He's a Vox Pops terrorist.
He's a columnist in Retro Gamer magazine, and most famously, you'll probably know him as being a big fan of both Fast Running and Minty Biscuits.
Yeah, that's the Bob Mortimer call, the Fast Running. They've gone wild, right? They've been up. So basically, Bob Mortimer 7 years ago called up my radio show 5 or 6 times and did prank calls where he pretended he was a guy called Keith talking about his nephew who was a fast runner. And they've been on, they're so much fun. And they've been on YouTube.
Maybe listen to them.
Did you enjoy it, Bob?
I remember them first time round and loving them. So when they popped up again, I shared them with Dave. Yeah.
But they've been on the YouTube for 7 years. And then I'm tidying up my channel because it's a mess. And I just retweeted them. In the past 2 weeks, they've had just shy of 500,000 listens, which my channel gets, I don't know, 1,000 views a month. Maybe about 1,500 views a month, and this has had 500,000. So I've made money on YouTube for the first time ever. I got in touch with Dave, Rose Tinted Spectrum, and I refuse to call him Rosie. It makes me uncomfortable. Just to say, what do I do now? And he taught me how to do thumbnails.
He's a nice. How old was
I
he?
like him.
I can't call him Dave because my name's Dave, and that's why I'm calling Rosie.
Okay. Rosie makes me shudder a bit.
You put Thumb Bandits on. That's your TV show. Was it in Sky that was on?
That was Channel 4.
Channel 4.
That was late night Channel 4. It replaced Bits, which I absolutely loved. And it was sold to me, we're going to do a serious video game show. We're going to get Matt Smith in to review the games. We're not going to do any speeded up silly sketches. And they lied to me. And it was not the show I wanted it to be. And I've always been a bit embarrassed by it. And people would come up to me and say, I really enjoyed Thumb Bandits. And I'd go, no, it was rubbish. And someone took me to one side and said, when you say that to people, it kind of is a bit rude and it means a lot to them. And you're telling them their memories are kind of worthless. And it made me reconsider the whole show. And now I've got a lot of love for the show. A lot of it doesn't stand up. My God, it's awful. In terms of the language I'm talking about, in terms of some of the jokes. I have a lot of respect and love for it, and I've got a lot of respect and love for the people that come up and say, oh, that show meant a lot. I really, really enjoyed it. And I'm understanding now why it's important for them. So, I've put a few of them up, but most of them are missing, I'm afraid. Lost media.
Yeah, is there an equivalent show for you, Iain? We look back on that with fondness. What do you look back on with fondness and nostalgia? What show?
I never watched Games Master. Okay. I never watched Breaking Bad until Rose Tinted Spectrum. This will age me. My gaming show was BBC Micro Live, with Fred Harris and Ian McNaught-Davis and Leslie Judd. Yeah. That was my show. I'm 51, and that was the most thrilling thing. I've watched some back recently, and my God, it's dry. As you can imagine as an 8-year-old.
We'll talk about that today, in fact. Yeah,
we will. Yeah.
I still enjoy it, though. I still think I felt as if they respected their audience.
Yeah. Oh, it was great. And Fred Harris, I got a real soft spot for him. I'm the only one that remembers him in this comedy show called End of Part 1, where he does a weird impression of Doctor Who. It's a very obscure show. And I got in touch with him recently to see if he wanted to be interviewed, and he very politely declined. But that man's got stories to tell.
Mm-hmm. Well, we will keep trying. I've been asked to reach out to him in the past, and I haven't seen him do any interviews anywhere on that past. But we'll keep trying. Maybe he's listening. Fred, if you're listening, come and be on the show. This week, I have just had a guest speaker day at the Cave. We had Richard Hewison, who is an author who's talked about his book on the history of Firebird. Lots of memories of Firebird games. I imagine you have too, Iain. What's the first Firebird game you think of?
God, I can't remember, but I do think of those iconic covers.
Yeah.
They were sort of, was it a sort of white border with the picture of the game in the middle?
Yes. Yep, it was a white.
And they were always, I had one on the BBC. It was like an ice factory kind of thing. They were always very hit and miss.
Yes.
The Firebird games. Yeah. Some were absolutely brilliant. A lot of them were lousy, being completely honest. Yeah. However, even the lousy games you would devour, because I would get a game a month if I was lucky, even with the cheaper label ones. I remember once I wasted my game of the month by getting Speech for the BBC, which allows the BBC to talk. And once you've typed in, thank you very much, Dave. Once you've done all of the swears, including the really bad ones where mum and dad are out, it lasts 10 minutes. But no, Firebird, it's the covers that really stick in my mind.
The covers famously had the screenshot of the actual game on the covers. So we learn all about that, and I will edit up the talk and share that on the channel soon. Also joined us was Pete Morland, who used to work at Microprose. Had a nice chat with him. Turns out he was the ghost driver on Stunt Car Racer. When you were racing the computer, you were racing a recording of him. So that was nice. I met the Stunt Car Racer driver.
I want to find out if you can bump I'm guessing from what you say, you can't bump them off the course.
I'm not sure you could do that on Stunt Car Racer.
Because I always wanted to try it. I was never sure if I was doing it or not.
You'd usually miss them and just go straight off the track, wouldn't you? Yeah. And we were also presented with a fabulous cake, a depiction of all of us at the Retro Collective in cake yesterday. And I've put some pictures up. Hopefully Duncan can share those as well. And I did discover if I push the cocktail stick up, I can move my head. So I reckon we're going to have some morph-style animations on the channel soon of us in cake.
Who's allowed to eat you?
Well, maybe it could be a prize. Maybe we could have a competition.
Put Neil in your mouth. Enter this competition now.
Again?
No, not again. Not again. Should we get into the show, Dave?
We're going to start today talking about a story written for Vice by Sean Sikachi and submitted to the subreddit by Dr. Local. It's titled, "Setting Up a Retro Corner Was the Best Decision of My Gaming Life." And he starts by saying he grew up in the 90s, so he's a bit younger than us. We're all about the same age, so it's still very valid despite that. And he talks about, he starts by saying, "I yearn for the simplicity of what once was in the world of gaming, before HD TVs were commonplace and before online gaming was as massive as it is now. I yearn for what is considered retro, and now that I own a house, I could make it happen." And that is me in 2019. In 2019, I sold my flat and I bought a house. Now, it's not a huge house, but it's certainly not a small one. And I knew right away that there was room for retro in it. Now, it's not a long article. Basically, he manages to get himself it up with a PS1. So that's the smaller re-release of the original PlayStation that they came out with, strangely enough, at the same time as the PS2, along with an Xbox and a CRT, and he loves it. So obviously this got me thinking, because I know that all three of us have done our own different journeys on this, and maybe most of our listeners have done the same as well. I firmly believe that having a dedicated space, even if it's just a small one, for retro helps a lot, helps you get into it. But when I lived in the flat, I would alt-tab in and out of emulators, and it just didn't grab me, didn't feel as real as it does when you're on a real machine. Now I have the space, I can do it. So let's go to you first of all, Iain. Do you have a dedicated retro space? How's you manage it? How's that's changed over the years? And what's not worked for you and what does? And what helps you enjoy Chucky Egg more?
It's the best game. I did in the kitchen. I had a little desk set up with a CRT and a BBC and a Dragon, but I never used them. I would just walk past them and go, I should probably. In the end, so I've put those in the garage. This is my space I'm sat at now, and it is kind of multi-purpose. I've got my computer, my mixer, my screens, my camera, and this is where I'm now working as a counselor. So I see online clients here. I also do streams and Patreon shows and things like that, and I do it here. So this is kind of multi-purpose, which is a little bit frustrating. It would be nice to have that break. It's also where I do my retro. And under here, what have we got? I buy so many modded consoles that I never use. So under here, I've got, these are all modded. The GameCube, the N64, I've got a 360, I've got an Odroid, I've got a Pi, a Dreamcast, and I would never use them. The Dreamcast occasionally. I played Typing of the Dead the other day for the first time ever. I thought it'd be rubbish. What a game. But that's all changed. So for years, I've had my eye on a Mister. But I couldn't justify 450 quid on something that I was never going to use. And then, a couple of months ago, I was listening to Reese's podcast, and he was talking about this Taki Udon cheaper Mister system that was like $160, and I was reading up on it. And I thought, well, I can justify that. Even if I don't use it, I can kind of justify it. And I found myself up, I think it was like 2 a.m. on a Thursday morning trying to get that first batch. And I got one. And I have one under here. It has changed my retro gaming world. I've been playing more retro games in the past 2 months than probably the past 2 years. And I was terrified it was going to be too technical. I love it. I love it. What I love more than the games actually is the tinkering, is the installing the games, is messing around with the cheats, messing around with that. I love it. I'm not very good at those technical things, so I'm learning as I go along. I'm enjoying that. But it's allowed me to, without an emulator, to dive into the BBC, to dive back into the Dragon 32, which I know is a terrible machine, but I love it. It was my first thing. I've also played what else have I been playing? Some Amiga games. I only ever had one experience with the Amiga back in the day. Someone lent it to me, And it was that game. Is it Altered Beast where you're like this wolf that's just walking along?
Shadow of the Beast?
Geez, so
it could be both, because Altered Beast you change into a beast. Whereas Shadow of the Beast, you're punching, walking along, you're a monster punching
eyeballs and things.
Yeah,
I don't want to be controversial. I'm going to, and it's because the first few episodes, and when I listen to Bo on ARG, he doesn't give, if something he doesn't like, he'll say it. So I don't want to be rude. That was such a terrible, boring, awful game, and I just thought this system is dull.
It's one of the poster games for the Amiga, and it has phenomenal music and atmosphere, and it sets this game up to be this wonderful exploration of this alien world. And the hitboxes are terrible, the gameplay's basic, and you're punching balls.
Put it in the window of a shop and it will sell Amigas, but play it and it won't. Yeah.
So I've been tinkering around with Amiga games for pretty much the first time ever. I've not delved in too deeply, but obviously I think you've got pretty much the complete back catalogue, and I've been dipping in and out. So the Takeudon Mr. Pie, I don't know why he called it that, has completely changed my gaming, and I'm doing it here, and I'm streaming it, and I'm having an absolute blast.
It's great. It's really great. The UI for it is a really important part of why it works so well, because you can choose the core and in you go, and you're not presented with this Rubik's Cube to work out how to play something.
Yeah, and I haven't had a problem with the Mister yet, where I turn it on and I turn it on and it just doesn't work. It doesn't corrupt itself, it doesn't get out of sync. It has worked for all the years I've had it. I turn it on and I'm confident it's going to work, and I know I can game within seconds. That's the important thing, because we've got so little free time. You want to turn it on, you want to know you're going to get straight into a game and play, and that's what it does so well.
I've loved it, and I do it here. So this is kind of my catch-all space. I don't have a dedicated retro space.
Well, do take a look. I've got to say this. Take a look at the Mr. Multi-System that you can clip the Takeudon onto, and it will consolize it for you in a nice case.
Do that when you visit the cave.
Yeah.
Okay, I still haven't visited. It is on my list. I'm not avoiding you.
No.
Life gets
I've got
in the way.
messaging. It's fine.
Okay, I will look at the multi-system. That sounds right.
Mr. Multi-System, yeah. A dedicated space. Did you not? I think for a period you had the BBC Micro by your Christmas tree. Is that where you used to have it, in that corner, Ian, when you used to stream?
I did have it in that corner for a bit. Those old computers are pain in the butt to stream, though, so I didn't. I tried it a couple of times, but then if I was streaming BBC, I'd just do it on an emulator and play. We'd stream, things like Bob's Full House. I love those old quiz TV tie-ins, so Bob's Full House and Blockbusters. And
Blockbusters are great.
There was Blockbusters. I think it was on the Spectrum, where it was two different games. One was Blockbusters and one was the Gold Run.
Yeah,
and they weren't combined, or maybe they were on different sides of the tape. I can't remember.
I really like this article. I know it's super short, but we all love having that dedicated space if we can get it. And I always liken this to the previous generation wanting to turn their loft into a train set. That was their retro corner, having the train set, the ultimate train set that they always dreamed of as a kid. They go up there and they put their driver's hat on and sit in the middle with their trains going around them. And I'm not belittling that. That's just the previous generation's retro. And for our generation, it's a nostalgia-driven hobby. And I think with this hobby, our cups all fill up at different rates, don't they? So for some, a Pi or an Amiga Mini will fill their cup up and they'll be happy with that. For others, they need a dedicated corner to satisfy them. And then there are those of us who have a hole in our cup and we go and build a museum. Yeah, just keep filling it up. But that's fine, because people come and enjoy that with me. And there are lots of traps to fall into along the way and rites of passage. So, for example, we've all got our first setup as a kid. We've loaded a game from a tape. We've moved on to emulators and got every single game ever on an SD card. And then we've gone back to loading from a tape again because there's too much choice. That's where the Mister is really nice, because you're going into a core that reduces your choice. And it's the simplicity of the menus make it much nicer. And when you're in it, you feel like you're in it. It doesn't feel like you're one click away from coming back to a main menu. You feel like you're in that core and you're on that system. It's hard to explain, but it works really well. You have a flat screen. We go out and try and find CRTs. Some of us have tried to recreate the experience in VR. I don't know if you've ever tried emulation in VR. Not doesn't quite hit the spot for me, but that's an option. So there are all these ways of trying it. And then you start surrounding your retro corner with trumpery like a Midlands Bank piggy bank or a Halifax Little Extra money box. I've actually done that. I've bought the Little Extra Club money box. Oh, Ian's off to get something. I've reminded him of something. See, he's been on this journey with us.
I bought this. It's vaguely. I bought this at Crash in about 1982. This was the must-have Christmas present, and I never got one. It's the Casio.
Oh yes.
It's. I saw this at Crash. It was 25 quid. I went, yes.
Yeah,
I'm getting it.
For those who are listening, Ian.
Okay,
what's it called?
It's one of it's one of those little Casio keyboards that were very big. I think it was about 1982.
They were never very big. They were always small.
They could do. They're famous for doing the band Trio had a hit with Da 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 that was played on this.
Da da.
That's it. They did like bossa nova beats, and instead of having keys, it's laid out like a keyboard, but it's got these little buttons, and it's got a guitar setting and a piano setting. They don't sound like that, but it's the last day. I remember in the last day of term when you could bring in toys. Someone brought in a Spectrum, and someone brought in one of these, and it changed my life. Anyway, finally, thanks, Mum and Dad. I've got one now.
So yeah, you've been on this journey, Ian. You've been out buying things that aren't just computers from back in the day to surround yourself with. And then you get to a point, I think, on this journey where you realize you're no longer trying to scratch an itch, or you're not even having a midlife crisis. It's now a hobby, and you're making friends, and you're learning new skills, and you're having fun and positive, forward-looking experiences within the nostalgia sphere. And I think that's really important to remember from the outside looking in. Revisiting your childhood or enjoying nostalgia isn't necessarily a bad thing. It's not an indication that you can't move forward or you're not forward looking. But you can do this in a very forward looking and positive way. And having a dedicated corner is a brilliant way to do it. And I think Sean really writes a great article on about it here. So nostalgia isn't always backwards looking.
So for me,
I feel like Ian could analyse me now. He could counsel me now on that.
Well, how does it make you feel?
There it is. Oh. There it is.
Do you find you're in counsellor mode when you don't want to be?
I can switch it off.
Good.
Well, no, I am analysing people, but subconsciously. So Dave, maybe you and I should have a chat after this about some things. No, I can switch it off.
Well, as for me, I have this entire room, which is used to be someone's bedroom until I bought the house. I have a set of 5 PCs all connected up to the same monitor, speakers, keyboard and mouse.
You've got your collection of storage crates.
I've got my storage crates in here and another 20 in the living room. I have my Mega STE, my Amiga, my Commodore 64, my Spectrum and Amstrad and GX 4000 all sharing the same setup. And then, of course, my Mister. And I have...
Oh, Ian, you've broken Dave.
Oh, I put my hand up and Dave's...
Dave just stopped.
David, sorry to interrupt. Can I ask, do you use all of those? Are they there for looks? Do you intend to use them but don't?
They're all set up. So the whole point of it is so that they're there to be used at any time I want. If I have to plug in a machine and find the power supply and fiddle it into the back and get all the rest of it, I won't use it. So my Atari ST, I can turn on the smart plug, everything will come on, and I'm there on the desktop ready to launch a game within a couple of seconds. Right. And that's how it has to be, otherwise I won't use them. So they're all set up with the intention of being that way. They're in various different states of repair. The Commodore 64 is empty, for example. There's nothing in it because I haven't yet soldered up the motherboard for it. The Amstrad CPC needs a belt changed. The PCs, there's a couple of cables I need to do on it, and I've just got a brand new Gravis ultrasound for the PC.
See, Dave, this is all forward-looking. All the things you need to do before you can use them.
I've turned into my own janitor. But I also have a PCW in another room, so that's the Amstrad. They came out with it after the CPC. It's a PCW, it's a Z80-based word processor with a lovely green screen. It looks fantastic, and I've got that to play text adventures on to get myself away from alt-tabbing. I have a MAME set up in the living room with my Flight Yoke, the Star Wars one, and I've got the virtual pinball machine as well in the living room. Massive, great big thing that the cats like to sit up on top of. I have too much stuff, definitely. But with the next set of home improvements, getting the loft converted and getting the garage done, I will have room for everything and it will be tidy and I won't buy any more. I think. But if I was to lose it all in a fire, if it was all to go and it was to do it all again, I would start off by getting a simple PC for emulation and set up different 86 box profiles. I would get myself a Mister, probably a multi-system because I think that's great, but a Mister certainly. And not just because my mate sells it. And I would go on from there to get controllers like the trackball, the spinner, the yoke, the steering wheel, instead of retro machines. And I would get the retro machines last. Because I think having the dedicated space is the important thing. I think that's what matters most. So have a read at the article. It's a short one. And have a think about what your ideal retro space is.
It's time now to thank our sponsor, who this week are PCBWay.com. What do they do, Dave?
They do PCBs and they weigh things. Do they weigh things?
Well, you can find out at PCBWay.com. God, I can see Ian squirming at the quality of this advert.
No, I'm squirming because I was hoping it was the other one, so that when you asked me the website, I could say it because I know it. But that's
Let's
not
do
to
it anyway.
disparage
What's the
PCB.
website for our sponsor, Ian?
The other one.
No, for our sponsor this week.
This is the sponsor this week is the excellent PCBWay.com.
Fantastic.
Okay.
They do CNC milling. They have, again, we keep talking about the USP, this project library, which is fantastic.
Yeah, so one last time, PCBWay.com. I think we've ticked all the boxes there.
PCBWay.
Thank you for the support. Thank you. It's time now for a list to stimulate our nostalgia. And this time it comes from Dr. Local, who links us to CBR.com, where there's an article named The 10 Best Retro Gaming Computers Ranked. We love a ranked list. The article is by Marley Hughes, who, his bio says, is a journalist who lives in Tennessee. And that US viewpoint might help to explain some of the choices on the list. What was that, Dave?
Growling and shaking my fist.
Dave's getting angry already. He also seems to be wearing in his bio picture, I think, a tie, maybe a neckerchief. And I just wanted to say that I may be one of the few, but I like a tie. I like the opportunity to wear one, and I like seeing an office full of professional tie wearers. Does that age me? Am I alone?
So retro, even in your clothing.
Oh, I like a tie. Anyway, on the list, from we'll go from 10 to 1, of course, so feel free to jump in with your thoughts at any time. He's not declaring that this is a list of historically important systems, simply what ancient microcomputers, not consoles, that he thinks are best to play retro games on. So, in at number 10, it's the Coleco Adam, which is a fairly obscure system. His justification is that the basis of the Adam was the ColecoVision console, so it is therefore a computer built on a gaming platform, which makes it good for gaming. I understand where he's coming from, but remember, this is a list of the best 10 retro gaming computers of all time. Does it deserve to be on there? Has anyone actually used one here? I haven't used an Adam.
No, but I suspect the author has.
It looks beautiful. Man alive, doesn't that keyboard look like? Imagine the feel and sound of those buttons. Have you got one at the cave?
No, I've got a ColecoVision, but I haven't got the Adam, which is the expansion to turn it into a full microcomputer.
This is clearly an American list, and he's clearly, I would suggest, put a few in to show off that he knows stuff that perhaps others don't. And I would suggest this is one of them. I've only played on a ColecoVision once. I enjoyed it. It was a bit of fun.
I don't think the Coleco Adam, we're going to discuss later on that there's not room in this list for all the things that deserve to be on it. And this doesn't belong on it.
Okay. Number 9, it's the Texas Instruments TI-99 4A. This was sold in the UK. Silence from both of you there. I'm only really...
They didn't have it set up in Boots or WH Smith's on a Saturday morning, so it doesn't count.
Yeah, exactly. I'm aware of it from more recent times from installing one in the cave. A few people have asked for it. It was available in the UK. I haven't explored the library enough to say how good it really was, but it has got some solid versions of titles I'm familiar with. There's a fan-made version of Jet Set Willy, for example, which is just fantastic on that machine. But I need to reserve judgment until I've played it a lot more, really.
This is silver and black, this one, isn't it?
That's right. It's a nice silver color, and technically it's a 16-bit CPU. But, you know, it showed, I think it was 1981, so it's shoulder to shoulder with the Spectrum. And there is something more familiar at number 8. It is the ZX Spectrum at number 8 from 1982. Super low-cost micro from Sinclair. And we can't say every game was high quality for the system, but there were tens of thousands to choose from, weren't there?
Spectrum brought, we know this, it's a wonderful machine that brought something that people couldn't afford to people who wouldn't otherwise have had a computer. It's a fantastic thing. The library is incredible. There are lots of games on it that don't push the system because they don't need to push the system. They just need to run on a computer, and someone has spent the time making these war games, these adventures, all sorts of stuff. It's a fantastic thing. Definitely belongs on any list.
It is. It's from. I prefer the design of the Spectrum Plus 2, which is kind of, people get quite angry at me with that because I like the keyboard thing. However, it is a thing of beauty. It at the time, absolutely incredible that you could do this. I didn't get one of these. I got BBC Micro. Again, thank you, parents. It was educational. We bought it in Rumbelows. That really does Rumbelows. But the library's great. And what was great being at Crash was the first time I saw the Spectrum.
The new one.
Remake of it. And I'm kind of tempted, but again, I wouldn't use it. I'll use the Mister. But that is a thing of beauty. And I saw it running and it just looks stunning. And there was a big pile of them. They sold like that, you know. I think that's gonna be under a lot of Christmas trees this year.
They're really well done as well. They've got you can reverse time on them. You can do save states and so on. It's not just a gimmick, and here's your Spectrum game, and we don't really care. We've filled it. Yeah. We've fulfilled our side of the contract. No, they've really put some thought into the software that's on it. Yeah.
If I got one, anybody listening, I wouldn't be disappointed. It would get used at least once and would be displayed. So, you know, if anybody
from Retro Games is listening,
Anyway, sorry.
At 7 is the Atari 400 from 1979, an astonishingly good machine considering its competition was the Apple II, the PET, and the TRS-80. It was the home of games like Rescue on Fractalus. And anyone I show the Atari 400 to in the cave and tell them it's from the 70s and not the 80s is usually really pleasantly surprised. Again, it was available over here, but much more popular in the US. Did you see that one in Rumbelows, Ian?
It wasn't in Rumbelows. They did have the 400 and the 800 in. It was like Dixon's, I think. You didn't normally go to Dixon's to play games. It was Boots. Mum would drop me off in Boots in Slough, go shopping, and then come back. But I did see it. He's picked a very dirty picture of one. I think it's beautiful. I don't know what it's like to play games on, but I think it is. I think it's stunning.
The Atari, sadly, the Commodore 64 just killed it, just came onto the market and just undercut it for what looked like to be the same machine. And all of a sudden, the Atari just screeched into a halt, and the games for it kind of stopped being developed.
At 6, it's the VIC-20 from 1980. Now, normally you'd go for the Commodore 64 on a list like this, wouldn't you, before the VIC-20?
Only 2 years before it.
Only 2 years before it, yeah. I've not got a lot to say about the VIC-20.
There's some good games on it.
I hate it.
Ian's passionate about this.
Yeah, dislike it.
Channel your inner boat, Ian. Tell us why you hate it.
The keyboard is all squishy and horrible. The text when you turn it on is just migraine-inducing, and the games are rubbish.
Okay, but you didn't have a complaint about the keyboard when we were just talking about the ZX Spectrum there.
Because it's the VIC-20 keyboard looks like it should be, you know, nice and tasty.
Right.
It's quite springy, I seem to remember.
Okay, it's deceptive. Okay.
Deceptive.
At 5, it's the Apple II GS. Now, I have to say, I've tried my best here to have a look. There are a couple of standout titles, but on the whole, I'd take the ZX Spectrum or the Atari 400 library over the Apple II or the 2GS any day of the week.
We're going to spoil it, but the Apple II is later on this list. So if you take the Apple II GS, you can't have the Apple II library twice in there. So all you've got is the Apple II GS specific stuff, and there's not enough of that to justify it. No. There just isn't, especially ahead of some of these other things. So I suspect he had one of these himself as a kid.
He references a game I've not heard of before called The Immortal, which is an isometric RPG. Looks a bit like Cadaver, if you've ever played that. But other than that, no, I can't think of any 2GS. Maybe the listeners can help us. Tell us a good 2GS game.
It's The Immortal is not unique to the Apple 2GS.
Oh, is it not? Okay.
Can I just say, dear listener, because I listened to this instead of watching it, Dave has got the most amazing shelves. They're literally buckling full of big box games. And what's great, as Neil was talking about, he just looked and went, oh, yeah, it's over there. His reference library is a thing to behold.
There are loads more that you can't see all around the room.
He's in his happy place.
I love them.
It looks great. It looks great, man.
And then it all goes wrong at number 4 on this list, doesn't it?
Here we go. Here we go.
Because, yes, number 4, the Atari ST. He does manage to mention how popular the system is for musicians, because what does the Atari ST have, Dave?
It's a MIDI typewriter. Go on, say it's a MIDI typewriter.
And he says the most iconic game on the Atari ST is Dungeon Master. Is that fair to say? Yeah, I think it is.
The ST was great for a short window in time for games. And let's remember, this is a gaming list, so the MIDI stuff doesn't matter. It's irrelevant that the Atari ST was used by musicians.
Well, that was MIDI Maze.
Yes, MIDI Maze used the MIDI ports, so you could have FPS, you have a LAN party in the 80s with 16 people fragging each other. If you had all the money in the world in the late 80s, you would want the Atari ST. Dungeon Master is, of course, the most popular game on the system, and it is absolutely fantastic, especially if you realise it came out in 1987 and you compare it to games like The Bard's Tale, how much of an advanced Dungeon Master was, and they got the gameplay really polished. It's a fantastic game. It took until Eye of the Beholder in 1991 to do something a little bit better than it, and that was 4 years, which was an eternity back then. The problem is with the ST, though, it didn't last very long. For a couple of years, it was getting 8-bit ports with nicer graphics. The nicer graphics didn't really help it. They looked worse on the ST than they did with the 8-bit graphics on the 8-bits. And then around about 1992, it was game over for the ST, and games stopped coming out for it mostly. And even by 1992, there was 2 years of the Amiga being the better computer. So the ST didn't have that long in the sun. So I don't know why it's up high up that list. I want it to be number 1, of course, just from nostalgia. Number 1, the Atari ST. Number 2, the CPC. Number 3, the BBC Micro. But I can't justify being up there. At least it's not as bad as the next one, though.
Oh, evil. Coming in at number 3, a much more sensible choice. The Commodore Amiga, on which you can play such high-quality games as Zool, he says in his article. I do think the Amiga and the ST deserve their place high up on the list, but it does always make me laugh when people use Zool as a reason, because my first impression back in the day when I first played Zool was it's kind of average. It's a nice try, but it doesn't come anywhere near Sonic the Hedgehog, which is exactly what it wanted to emulate. It just felt like an okay version of a game that we'd seen a lot of times before. Give me Turrican 2, Kickoff, Speedball, Lemmings, F-29. Also available on the Atari ST. Yeah. Come on, Dave.
If the Amiga's on there, it should be in the strength of on the Amiga-only games. The problem with the Amiga is, of course, that once it took over from the ST as being the place you wanted to play 16-bit games, the PC was also coming in there, as was the Mega Drive. So, I don't think the Amiga should be as high up the list.
What are you putting higher up the list, Ian? Amiga or Atari ST? One of the things I love about your show is this whole playground rivalry, because it reminds me how big the rivalry was around games. Back in the day, we got a Betamax, and boy, I lost the VCR wars quite badly with the Betamax. So I love hearing this rivalry. I have no emotional connection with either machine. Again, I'm looking forward to kind of diving in and playing both. I think they both look beautiful. I think aesthetically, what great designs, iconic designs. But I don't have any emotional connection. I don't really have that knowledge yet. I'm looking forward to having a go on both of them.
Do you not think, Neil, the Spectrum should be higher up than both?
Let's just see what's higher up the list, and we'll reflect on that in a moment. Because we're up to number 2 now. At number 2, it is the Apple II. which is kind of odd because we had the 2GS earlier, which is backwards compatible with the Apple II. So you've already covered that library. Something tells me that Marley has a thing for the Apple II or Apples.
I'm going to argue. I'm going to argue here. The Apple II is the system where almost every adventure and RPG has its roots.
Okay.
And if you look at American game designers, the really important ones, they invariably say they started on the Apple II.
You got to remember, though, Dave, this list isn't about historical importance.
I know, but I can't stop forgetting that. The games were there in the Apple II. The Apple II, in my head, is what came before the 286. It kind of went Apple II, then 286. I know that's not how it works, but that's how it, in my head, that's where it comes. So the Apple II gets what there. But
if you're following a series like King's Quest, for example,
yes,
no, that didn't start there.
Ultima.
But you had Mystery House.
Ultima.
So Sierra games kind of go back to there. Ultima goes back to there. Yeah.
Just dinging the Ultima bell.
Oh, there it is.
You guys.
There it is. We must apologise to Holly, actually, because after the show last week, she had laid out on the table a whole load of bingo cards of things that she thought we were going to say. And I think we only said one thing through the entire show. She'd gone to so much effort. So thank you, Holly. And finally, number one on the list of the best retro gaming computers of all time is the Commodore 64. Of course, it's a strong choice. I don't think we'll hear too many arguments over that being in the top 10 or even the top 3. But I am left reading the list feeling that there are some notable absences. I want to hear what you two are thinking, first of all. Is it a sensible list? Is it too US-centric? If we made our own list, would we be too UK-biased? Thoughts? Can we separate emotion from this kind of list? I don't think we can.
Well, the Commodore 64, let's say some good things about it. The Commodore 64 has a tremendous library. It existed for a huge length of time, and loads of games play fantastic on it. Platformers and shooters play great on the Commodore 64. And there are lots of adventures and RPGs that may not play great on it because of the text on it, but there's a huge library to play, so it does belong up there. But I think part of the problem is you can't just sum up all the important machines in a list of 10. You have to miss some out. And I can easily justify some others going in. And I think if we're going to go with 2 criteria here, I would like to go with 2 criteria. How important is the system in terms of what legacy did it leave us with? And the second is, how good do the games stand up now? And maybe a third one is, if this game suddenly stopped, this game system, this computer stopped existing, what would we lose that we couldn't do elsewhere? I'd argue that the Amiga should be way down the list. How can you say the Amiga is more important than Spectrum? The Amiga was great from 1990 to 1992. But for the earlier part, it was running Atari ST ports, and for the later part, you were better off with the PC or Mega Drive. The Apple II GS can get right out of the list. It just doesn't belong there. But there's 2 things missing from this list, 2 really important things missing. The first is a 386DX
or
beige
just an IBM
box PC.
Any IBM PC compatible.
Any
How have we
IBM
not got the PC in the list?
386 is the point I'd say. That belongs there. And the second thing is, what about the PC-88 or the Sharp X68K? There's nothing Japanese in there. The Japanese were having fantastic fun with wonderful things in there. And I'd like to somehow I can't sneak a Dragon 32 on there, but we could get the Coco on. It's kind of close enough. I don't know.
The Dragon 32 is not a good computer. I can accept that. And it's the thing I got when I was, 8 or 9. So I have a lot of affection for it. I do go back and play it on the Mister. It's great seeing it on there. It's not a great computer. This is an American list. I'm surprised the Spectrum is on it at all if it's an American list, because I don't think it did much business over there. The list would be slightly different. I think if it were British, the BBC would have to be on there because it had some great games and it was iconic. It was the first computer a lot of people my age ever touched because it was in school. One of the things I've noticed listening to your show from episode 1, and I don't get it, but I enjoy it, right? And I watch Reese's videos on these, and I find these. I do not understand your fascination with old PCs because it's something I don't have any emotional connection with. I got my first PC in 1998. It was from Time. Oh, man. And to me, computer is just something that you use. And so I don't... hang on, what's Neil bringing up? Is that a Time? Oh, look at that.
It's a tiny.
It's a tiny. It's beautiful. I mean, they're beautiful. I don't get it. And you go, it's got an 8.62 processor from a Voodoo 9 sound card. I don't get it. I enjoy this. How do you know
that? How do you know it was in it?
Because I think the other week you're debating Voodoo 1 or Voodoo. I don't get it. However, I do enjoy listening to it. I do enjoy Reese's videos when he gets some weird old computer from Japan and spends, 6 months trying to fix. I love it. I find it almost like ASMR. But I don't get it. And it's interesting the things that people have connections with and very passionate about and things that people don't, especially within the retro gaming console computer world.
The PCs, aside from the nostalgia for the form factor and the industrial design and so on, the 386 PC that you got had super VGA graphics, it had a hard disk, it had a sound blaster. It was absolutely phenomenal in comparison to what my Atari ST was. So that's a big part of it.
Yeah, and it's hard to just say PCs. There are generations of it. There's the 80s, I wouldn't have touched a PC in light of the Amigas and the Atari STs. In the 90s, you've got your 256 color point and click adventure games that just can't touch on my Amiga. So it depends on the generation. But yeah, I do think the lack of an IBM PC compatible of any generation is criminal on this list. If the 2 and the 2GS can be on there, then give me a ZX Spectrum and a Sam Coupe. Why not? If a Coleco Adam can be on there, give me an IBM Terra Drive or an Amstrad Mega PC so I can play my, Megu Drive games. What about from Sega? From Sega. What about the MSX? What about the MSX2? I'd rank that higher than an Apple II for gaming. But yeah, there's a lot of emotion and definitely that American slant to this list. So I think we might revisit this question later for our question of the week, so we can hear your thoughts and put together our own list.
Dave's Briefs. Dave's Briefs. Dave's Briefs. Or is it housekeeping? I don't know.
Boom.
Housekeeping.
There we go.
Welcome back, DJ Chris Fury, and welcome on Carl as patrons. Thank you very much for signing up and supporting us and becoming twirlers. What does twirler mean, Iain?
This week in retro, let's enjoy regular shows.
Great. Thank you for signing up. Where can people go, Neil, if they want to become a twirler?
They can go to patreon.com/thisweekinretro. Thank you.
The real Cartoon Monkey did something a bit special with a CRT wall showing This Week in Retro, and Neil cruelly bullied me with it, saying that I wasn't on it. Well, he has rectified that with a fantastic animation, which you'll find on the subreddit, and Duncan will link here. He'll put the visuals of that on there. But to hear the sound and the visuals, you'll need to go and download the zip file and run it on your Amiga or your Mister or your Win UAE to see it. So thank you very much for doing that.
And we've done a poll. It's only taken 198 shows to do a poll on the subreddit. Duncan put it up there. It said, our first poll is for audio-only twirlers. We've been using an audio bit rate of 192 kilobits per second because he wants it to sound nice. But would you be happy with 128K? Why is he asking this, Dave?
I don't know.
Is he trying to save on bandwidth or something?
I think for vocal word spoken, that's the word, spoken podcast, I think 128 is absolutely fine.
Okay, well, I'm going to say yes, and we'll get the results. No. In the lead is no. People want 192 by 19 votes to 12.
Can we get 256?
The people have spoken.
Fair enough. On to briefs now. And G7VFY tells us that the oldest operational satellite is now 50 years old and was only expected to last 10 years, but it was built by amateur radio hobbyists. And I expect that many of us who are into micros, etc., who are particularly into the repairing and so on, if we were around in the 60s instead, would be into this kind of thing. Radio hobbyists. So this is the people that came before us, the people after the train set people.
C3 Rex links a 30fps.net article asking, don't you cry inside when someone shares an MS-DOS screenshot in a wide aspect ratio? I mean, I would expand on that and say any screenshot that should be 4:3 shared, stretched into widescreen. But the author doesn't just complain. They do offer a solution on their page to reformat those images when you come across them to soothe your anger.
Juicy Cow links us to an article on Games Radar that says in 2021, accessibility advocates got the US Copyright Office to agree a DMCA exception that would make it legal for players to break a PC game's copy protection in order to make it playable for people with disabilities. And that decision was quietly reversed this year, along with the other US copyright decision, because no one has stepped up to defend the exemption, which is a really sad thing. This is what our legislators should be doing for us, standing up for these things. So that's very unfortunate.
G7 VFY links us to a great interview with 4am, who is an Apple II cracker who has removed over 1,500 copy protection systems from Apple II games. That is some hardcore hacking.
Oh.
Yes, got that in
boo.
there.
Starcade 2084 has an image of an advert for the Excalibur 64, a computer seemingly from 1983 that I've never heard of. It's a funny shaped thing with a separate keyboard and a desktop case with twin 5.25 inch floppies, and the advert has Excalibur buried in the top of it. A quick Google, and I'm not sure whether it exists or not. Neil, have you heard of the Excalibur 64?
No, but in
fictional
1983, it would have been competing with the Sword M5. So there you go, two sword-based computer systems. An interview with Roland Perry, famous for jumping in caves, climbing ropes and time travel, is linked to, by Malcolm851, titled Everything We Did It Immediately, which was recorded at the Centre for Computing History. Roland Perry, of course, the designer of the Amstrad CPC. And yes, I will try, now that he's doing the rounds, because he was quiet for years and years and years, and suddenly he's turning up at Expo. So I will see if we can get Roland in the cave at some time.
He's very interesting. He speaks very well.
Isn't there a game, Roland in the Cave?
There is. That was the punny, and that was the
Oh,
pun.
I'm sorry. You're better than I thought. I do apologise.
From Juicy Cow, the Casio G-Shock, the amazingly rugged but inexpensive watch from the 80s, I think, is being remade by Casio, and it looks exactly right. It's currently 50 quid in their Black Friday sale, which I think is fair enough for a watch. I've got a smartwatch, so I wouldn't buy it. But yeah, it looks great. And there are loads more in the subreddit. Go to our subreddit, reddit.com/r/thisweekinretro to submit articles, to read all the things on there if you're having a crafty log, and to hit the upvote and downvote arrows to
that cannot become a catchphrase. That cannot become a catchphrase. Stop it.
I always enjoy going back and watching the BBC and other places too when they talk about how the future will be. There's lots of reasons for it, not just to hear what the past thinks what the future will be, but also what they think matters most about what's coming, but also how they frame the explanations in terms of what's contemporary at the time. But I think what I like most about them is the optimism. Sitting watching someone tell me that the future is going to be bright and there's wonderful things coming. I'm talking about Tomorrow's World in the UK. There would have been similar shows across the world, of course. I don't know if it's because I'm a cynical, jaded old man these days, but when I see things talked about what's coming, it looks like crypto bro nonsense layered with junk tier AI. Or maybe we just don't have news coverage which tries to be positive and forward looking. Maybe that's fallen out of fashion. Anyway, going back to this video, it really is good. It's presented by Vanessa Collingridge with a terribly posh English accent. Terribly posh. And even though it's 1995, it does feel as if it was done in the early 80s BBC style, rather than the youth TV, like, I don't know, the 11 o'clock show. Maybe TV aimed at business was still far too serious to have a regional accent.
Your posh British accent, Dave, was bang on Patrick Moore, I thought there. That was really good.
Terribly posh. it's a supercut of every explainer from this multimedia business, which was a TV show that ran for a few episodes toward the ends of 1995. It is remarkably well informed. It gets everything right, and it's very thorough, and it goes through absolutely everything that's cutting edge and current in 1995. And that's a great snapshot to look at, because all of a sudden we've gone from PCs doing spreadsheets and Word documents and mail merges to PCs doing absolutely anything you could think of. I did note that HTML was one of the first things they explained, and then the internet was one of the last, which makes me wonder, did they really get the link between the two of them? Because when HTML was first explained to me, it was done in a way that made me think that this was what the internet would be. You would follow hyperlinks to everything, which is what it is. CD-ROMs are also covered, and they were fairly new technology at the time. And the writer they have is massive, bigger than a shoebox. And my favorite quote from the video is, the process of writing a CD-ROM is called burning a worm. So that obviously didn't catch on. Write once, read many, worm. Never heard of that. And each of these discs costs only about £5. So £5 for a blank CD. I don't remember that. They had flatbed scanners. They had, and the more that I watched this, the more I realised just how much technology arrived in the mid-90s with multimedia and how much I'd forgotten about.
Yeah, worm. Write once, read many, as you said. I guess CD-ROM, CDR, CDRW was far easier to understand intuitively. But the context is there that worm was supposed to be a CD that had been written rather than a CD that had been pressed in a factory. There is a reference I found to it in an old Philips CDI manual in about 91, but it obviously didn't catch on beyond that. The style of presentation of this video, very English, as you said. I don't know why. She kind of reminded me of Quinton Wilson, mid-90s Top Gear, the way she was speaking about things. My favorite bit is when she watches a terrifying clip of a dummy laughing and then turns to the camera and just says, "That's quite enough of that," and carries on. Iain, you've got a lifetime of television work under your belt. Do you remember making any quite serious videos about the future of technology, or did you do any like corporate training videos or anything of that ilk?
I remember on the 11 o'clock show, and I remember in 1999, the producer coming up to us and saying, "Right, so what we're going to do now is it's a new thing. Is we're going to give out it's called a link, and people can go to it and they can send us messages. And it was www.11o'clockshow.com, whatever. And I remember, we got some terrible stuff. And I remember saying to him, "This is pointless. It's going to take up time. Why are we doing this?" That's how out of touch I was with the whole thing. This video is very dry. I noticed, I like the thing of it being futuristic, but then they show that terrifying fairground toy of the laughing sailor.
That's what it was, yeah.
But however dry it is, I will never tire of watching people from the 90s explaining how email works. I love it because it's something that is so ingrained in us. You know, we do it on the bus without even thinking about it. So there's that wonderful clip from the BBC from about 10 years before, and it's a couple with their BBC Micro linked up to Prestel and sending messages. People explaining what an email is and how it works. I could put that on a loop. I could watch that for hours.
You can follow it all the way back. I think there's a clip from like the early 80s of the Queen sending the first email in England ever.
Oh, wow.
You can go all the way back, yeah. I always remember when I worked for BT, I used to have to sit through training videos of John Cleese telling me how to give the best customer service when I was on directory inquiries. You never had to do anything like that, Iain?
Faulty Tower style.
No, I have. I had.
You
to
have standards
training ones, but no, I never. Well, no, actually, I did make a series of videos that were really embarrassing. I was in quite a bit of trouble financially, and it was a quick cash job, and it involved me dressing up like a superhero. I am not going to say what it was because I don't want people to go and dig it out because it was flipping awful. It was humiliating, but I had a big tax bill.
You had to put food on the table.
Exactly.
Are we missing out on optimistic news? Am I drawn to doom scrolling and missing out on the good stuff? Is there kind of positive news out there that I'm just not seeing, Neil?
Doom scrolling. I think it's the Oxford English Dictionary's word of the year they chose for this year was doom scrolling.
I thought the word of the year was brain rot.
Oh, it was. Sorry. No, they explained brain rot was as a consequence of doom scrolling. That's where I got it from. So it's brain
Fair
rot.
enough.
You're right. Yes.
I would suggest, that there is good news about gaming and computers in the future, but it's not necessarily coming from, traditional media. It's smaller YouTube channels and TikTok. I've been watching this guy, Pixel Cherry Ninja, who's so enthusiastic about Mister. There's Reese that will, been reviewing stuff. There are so many smaller independent people who are saying this is great and this is what we might have in 10 years. It's just not the BBC or newspapers necessarily.
Time now for our community question of the week. And last week's question was, as it seems that game has become a shadow of its former self, we ask, what was the last thing that you bought in a physical game store? And when was it? Iain, can you remember the last thing you bought?
I really thought about this. I couldn't, apart from Computer Exchange, I can't think of the time I bought anything new. Very, very briefly, because I know we're out of time. I do remember when the 3DS came out, I was paid to be the celebrity in a game store at midnight as people came in to buy it. And I got paid very well. And I just had to go around going, oh, look at this. If you slide that, it'll go 3D. So I remember those days. I can't remember the last time I bought something new.
Yeah, no, I struggled, and I'm thinking back to Grand Prix 3 in about 2001, 2000, in game in Basingstoke, of all places. That's the last time I remember being excited about buying a boxed game.
Baldur's Gate in Glasgow in HMV.
There you go.
Look at the pride on his face as he says that. That's beautiful.
So our
Well, makes you remember something.
Our top answer comes from OK Leading, says the FNAF collection for the Switch. I don't know what that is.
Five Nights at Freddy's.
Oh, there you go.
FNAF.
He says, I'm kicking myself because I didn't pick up a loose Centipede 2600 cartridge for £5, which they had at the same time in the retro section in Llandudno. Dave, do you want to take the next one?
Robert Crowther says the last thing I bought a game was some Lego flowers for Valentine's Day.
Oh, that sums it up, doesn't it? Lego it game.
My partner is not good with plants, so I got her something she couldn't kill. I don't think I've ever bought an actual game from Game. The last new box game I bought was at a store. It was Lego DC Supervillains for the Switch at Argos, and not even a real Argos. It was a pop-up store at EGX Resd. I've since bought the downloaded version of it, which included all the DLC, and traded the box version in at CX and got Paper Mario, the Origami King, when it was fairly new. So that's how long ago all that happened. The last PC box game I got from a store was Half-Life, which I got from Tesco in 2001.
Iain, do you have the page open or not?
I have not done my homework. I do not have the page open.
I'll read the next one. It's Snoo Panda says the last physical thing I bought in game was a Hero Quest expansion for the board game. These answers are really summing up what game has become. I bought a board game expansion in game. The last
I'm
video
okay with
game,
that as long as they've still got the games, but it's when they've got that instead of the games.
Yeah.
What
the
they
last
stand for.
video game they bought was from game was 2019. I had to take my nan into town to help her sort some bank stuff. It was sort of a dementia adventure for her, he says. Once we got her sorted at the bank, I asked if she would mind me going to the local game shop. She smiled and said, "You never grow up." And we went there and bought some games. That's nice. My local shop was one of the stores where all the Xbox 360 trade-ins were. And they bought a load, went to the desk with the nan and bought a 360 console for £10. Nan pulled a £10 note out of her purse and said, "I will buy you a toy."
Oh, that's lovely.
That's beautiful. How wonderful.
Oh, I hope you let Nana give you a big whiskery kiss on the cheek as thanks.
And I hope you let her play Rainbow Six.
Yes. Tango down. Any others jump out for you, Dave, in the answers there this week? There's a lot of answers.
It's just that it's the same thing. It's people just dropping off over the years. Some people dropping off in the late 90s, some people dropping off in the early 00s, and a few people still going and buying stuff. But just a theme of people who I know are all still buying games at some point stop buying them in shops.
Yeah. And then the last one I'll read, Christ of YGU, this will make Ian happy. He says, 2 days ago, I bought Typing of the Dead for the Dreamcast and the keyboard for a tenner. That's a bargain.
That is fantastic. And wow, that Dreamcast keyboard, I've got it down there. It's a thing of beauty. It's great.
So that brings us finally to our question of the week for this week, based on our list that we went through earlier. What are your top 5 computers, not consoles, for retro gaming? Let's make our own list.
Let's be really specific about the criteria to help people. Is it for their legacy, for how important they are, or just for how good it is to play the games now?
Fantastic.
What's the criteria, Neil?
How good they are to play games on now.
Right. So that's all that matters.
Okay, we'll do that. Thank you again, Ian, for joining us.
Yeah.
Been
Thank
a
you very
pleasure
much,
to have you on.
It's such a thrill. I love this show so much. I think you do such a great job and your guests are brilliant. I love it. Keep it up. Keep it up, lads.
And is there anything you want to shout out right now? Anything you want people to check out, yours or anyone else's?
Well, okay. Do you know what? There is a great podcast I've found. It's fairly new. It's the Retro Adventurers.
Yes.
And each week they go into a really deep dive of text adventures. It's got me champing at the bit. I'm going to start streaming some text adventures. So I recommend them, the Retro Adventurers. And also I mentioned him before, Pixel Cherry Ninja is great watch.
So I've been listening to the Retro Adventurers. It is great. They do some interviews as well, which are good. But it's so good to hear a Game of the Week show where someone has gone really deep into it. They really know what they're talking about rather than just something on the surface. So I really enjoy that show. I recommend it. I also recommend a YouTube channel from a guy, Iain Lee, because there's loads of stuff on there. I was nearly in tears watching the Vox Pops last night. It was so good.
Well, thank you, Dave. I appreciate it.
Too modest to promote himself. So Duncan, please put the links in the show notes. Everyone go and check that out. And as always, have a wonderful week and we'll see you next time. Take care. He's waving. Oh, he's got a very fast wave, has Ian. Yeah. He's a fast waver.
Famous for my fast
wave. Running, fast waving.
Bye, twirlers.
Bye.
This Week in Retro was presented by Neil from RMC The Cave and Dave. It was produced by me, Duncan Styles. The podcast version of the show is available through your favourite podcaster, including Apple Podcasts and Spotify. And the video version is available on the This Week in Retro YouTube channel.
Join our community subreddit at r/thisweekinretro to suggest and vote on the stories we cover on the show. If you watch This Week in Retro on YouTube, please give us a like and subscribe to help us reach new viewers.
If you enjoy our show and would like to support it, then please check out the link to our Patreon page in the show notes or description. Thank you for listening, and we'll see you next time for more up-to-date news for out-of-date tech.